this country, first off, they were arresting doctors who were trying to warn people of what was going on. They were arresting them. Remember, we had that as a headline, remember? That was an actual headline. And there were a number of them who were trying to warn the people that, hey, there's this virus. It's highly, highly, highly contagious. And they're trying to warn people. For one, LA Times had a good piece, Business Insider, MSN, AP, I mean, name it. There were a number of doctors that they arrested. One of them was the doctor who died of it. This doctor, Dr. Li Wenliang, was sending warnings, according to LA Times, of a deadly virus on social media. He was warning people, this is a coronavirus. It is mutating. It's going to be incredibly difficult to contain. We got to get ahead of it. And he was tweeting about it. And then the Chinese government, he was getting it on social media as best he could. China doesn't necessarily have Twitter. And the Chinese government was trying to downplay it, but the doctor kept insisting that they tell the truth. So they arrested him. He was a folk hero. They arrested him and 7 others for what they called spreading rumors. And this was in January that they arrested him. And then shortly after, everything that we saw happen in Wuhan was taking place. And he did an interview with a Chinese publication, and he was in quarantine. And he said, I don't care if I'm vindicated or not. It's important people know the truth. And he died in February in a hospital in Wuhan because he'd been treating people as well. And early reports of his death were retracted. And he left behind a wife and child, and a number of other doctors, not several, a number, were also arrested. And they lied about their numbers initially. China lied about them. They were trying to hide and trying to downplay the number of fatalities. And then when they started actually having to report the number of fatalities, it increased 70-fold, something insane. They also, in addition to that, they not only were arresting doctors, they were lying about their numbers. They were all of this. They also refused to share, and I have a piece on this. They were refusing to share the genome sequencing. And it was for 14 days, they refused to share any results of this. And there were all of these state-owned Chinese media outlets began just echoing what Beijing was telling everyone to say. And I mean, Beijing lied they lied for a month and a half about human-to-human transmission, about the existence of it. They were lying and downplaying that. They refused to admit it. Now, if you're all these other countries and you're going off of reports of what you're hearing and you're trying to get your countries prepared, how do you think that bodes for all these people that are getting mad at the United States or getting mad at these other? You realize that it started here and they were refusing to share any data. So that's why we're all behind. There's no, don't sit here and be like, well, it's because the CDC didn't have money. Really? Because the CDC, they're so underfunded. I retweeted one great point. They had to divert resources away from pandemic detection and prevention to express concern about stigma and miscounting gun injuries and playing into gun control. Whatever. Don't even play me with that. So there were a number of Chinese journalists that were also arrested for reporting the truth. There were, there's so much of it. And the genome sequencing, they would not share, they withheld it for 14 days. That's the estimation of they think that it actually may have been longer, that they'd actually discovered it earlier. In fact, there is one of the publications that they have in China, which is an economic and finance news site. And it was the only one that was resisting, called Kaikshin. It was resisting, and I butchered that name, the efforts of Beijing to control their content. And so they were continuing with investigative reports. And when the COVID stuff really started swelling up, they focused more and more on that. And they were resisting the propaganda department in Beijing. And there was a Chinese pulmonologist, Dr. Zhong Nishan, who confirmed human-to-human transmission, and they aired it on China Central Television on January 20th. And then they came for him. And then the Cation, the newspaper, or the economic and finance publication, they interviewed a microbiologist in Hong Kong who said that the scale of the outbreak could be 10 times bigger than SARS. But everyone ignored it because the majority of the media outlets, in fact, pretty much every single one but two, followed Beijing's instructions to refuse airing any of this information, refuse sharing it, refuse reporting on it. And they said, well, we don't want to create a social panic. But they didn't do anything about it. So then one of the last investigations that they had on February 26th, they found out that 9 samples collected from patients with unexplained viral pneumonia had been sent to multiple labs for testing as early as December 2019. Upon interviewing a number of medical doctors who were in charge of treating patients at the very initial stage of the outbreak, the Cation journalists obtained a list of labs which had helped the hospitals to run analysis of the new virus. And this comes from a couple of different locations, including a Hong Kong publication. The journalists, they obtained all these labs were working with these hospitals. And upon the testing, there was one lab that found out that the genome sequence of the new virus was 87% similar to bat SARS, like the coronavirus. The lab shared the results with the China Institute of Pathogen Biology and the Chinese Center for Disease Control and Prevention on December 27th. But the National Health Commission issued a regulation banning all labs from sharing and releasing their test results. They did this in the first couple of days in January. China only allowed the release of the genome sequence of COVID-19 to the World Health Authority, WHO. That was on January 11th, 2 weeks after they got a hold of the result. Now, sidebar, we had a headline around that time talking about how the World Health Organization had asked China to release any data related to sequencing on this so that people could start to work on a vaccination and also map it better so that they could get a better understanding as to how it was going to spread, right? So we had that headline. Now it's all coming together. So they finally allowed the release only to the World Health Organization, a subsidiary of the UN, and then Cation had a report so explosive, it showed that Beijing had withheld very significant public health information for 14 days. The genome sequence, for those who don't know, and this publication also explains, it's essential not only in the production of diagnostic testing, but also in tracking the origin of the virus to prevent any outbreaks in the future. They removed it online. Beijing removed that publication's report of this online. They removed it. But the internet never forgets. And there were some Chinese internet denizens that saved it, and they got a PDF of it, and they saved it and they put it up online in multiple different places to where Beijing couldn't get all of it. So Cation's investigation into this was just erased step by step by Beijing. And they also questioned the data of the confirmed infection rate. Remember how it was originally, they showed that China's numbers were really small and everyone's like, oh, well, it seems like we could contain this. And then I think it was towards end of, I think it was maybe beginning of February. That's when their numbers like jumped. Well, they had been lying about it. Cation had an investigation showing that they were lying about the number of infected, and that was taken offline. They showed that the death toll that Cation reported was also censored. And again, there are some super brave. You want to talk about brave journalists? I know like Acosta thinks he's one. The brave journalists are the ones that are in China that are risking their lives, getting this information, sharing it with each other, and putting it in so many places online across the world that Beijing can't erase it all because they want to save lives. Beijing wants to save face. So that report, the death toll, the original death toll was also removed. And then there was a doctor from one of the hospitals in Wuhan that was apparently like at the like zero right there. And he told the Cation publication that out of 120 fever patients, meaning patients that were demonstrating the high fever, it's one of the symptoms of COVID, that they received on a single day, 80 of them had pneumonia. Only 5 were admitted. The rest were told to self-quarantine at home. Cation's reporters interviewed a dozen families who shared that their relatives had also died of unexplained pneumonia before the COVID testing became a procedure. So China wasn't even testing. They know that the earliest emergence of this was in November, but what the reports from Cation are suggesting is that it even predates that. And it was going on for so long, and Beijing just was like, no, we don't need to test. That's huge.